Hey folks, it's Gus from Foundation Football, and today I want to talk about something which I think is very, very important for parents. Also, of course, for kids. Kids are not aware of what happens behind the scenes and so forth, as much as I guess coaches and parents are. But this is an important vlog. I think every parent should listen to because I'm aiming at perhaps giving parents a different perspective. The perspective that comes from a coach, from a teacher, from somebody who has to deal with the ins and outs of the team, and it relates primarily to game time on the weekends, and what it actually means, what playing on the weekend actually means in this country, and whether or not um, it's going to affect your children long term, whether they play less or they play more. And I think it's one of those situations where, I mean, the question you need to ask is what came first, the chicken or the egg. It's I guess the fundamental thing I'm trying to get here is that there is a foundation that needs to be planted, that needs to be laid from a very early age. And if you don't plant that foundation properly, game time on the weekend diminishes. It doesn't allow your child to command more time on the pitch. But even then, even if he does command more time on the pitch, in my opinion, based on my perspective on the years and years that I've been coaching youth football, weekend games are a novelty. And I've said that many, many times. Weekend games are a novelty. And I'd like to sort of get into a little bit as to why I think that's the case. Okay, so um, first of all, before I start, I just want to highlight something very, very important, and that is that children at every stage of the continuum of their development through. Okay, so as I was saying before, I was rudely interrupted by my dogs. Children through every stage of their development throughout each age group have different needs, and they vary significantly. Uh, for years, I've been basing everything I do on numbers, um, or mathematics. If you want to talk about it in terms of science, it's football is mathematics, and it comes back down to number of touches, number of interactions, and this is why I think that the game on the weekend is a novelty, because if you actually think about it in sense of how many games are played every year, competitive games, they number roughly, let's just say roughly rounded figure around 30 games a year. We can maybe add maybe 5 or 6 friendly games that we might play pre-season against some other clubs. So you may be looking at about 30, 35 games a year. All right. So at every age group, there's a different amount of time that's played. So for example, in SAP, I think under 9s play 15 minutes each way or 20 minutes each way. It then increases to about 30 minutes by the time they get to under 12s. At under 13s, it's 35 minutes. It's 30 minutes each way, so it's 60 minutes of football once a week. And it increases from there. So it goes up to 35, then 40. At the moment, I'm coaching 15s and 16s, and we play 40 minutes. So it's 80 minutes of football. At the moment, in my age group, the 15s, it's 70 minutes of football. Now, we have 16 players on the team. That means 11 will start and 5 will sit on the bench. Okay, so I need to try to manage those 5 players to be able to get 5 on and 5 off without disrupting the team ethos too much, without disrupting the consistency. I need to try to be fair. I need to try to give equal game time. So theoretically, if we break it down to numbers, at another 15 level, 70 minutes, the majority of those 16 players will get about 35 minutes of football every weekend. So 35 minutes of football times 35 games, you do your maths, it's not a lot. It's literally nothing, to be honest with you, because most of the time they're sitting on the bench, giving somebody else a turn and an opportunity to develop as much as they do. Now, not every team does that, but I do. I try to give every player on the team 35 minutes. I do make a bit of an exception with my stronger players. I tend to try to keep the core of the team on the pitch for as long as possible. so that the results don't go all over the place. So that there's a bit of consistency there where my stronger players tend to lead and guide the weaker players. So yeah, so the weekends to me is a novelty simply because of the mathematics involved. Out of a 70-minute game, if you play a full 70 minutes, you may touch the ball for a period of about 2 to 3 minutes. You may get maybe 60 or 70 opportunities to touch the ball. The rest of the time, it's being aware positionally, being aware of where you are, where you're standing, how to receive the ball, all those things. And a lot of that comes from practice at training. So it's at training where you actually learn. It's at training where you actually improve as a child. It's training is the most important thing for any youth player that wants to better their game. It's what you do at training, how you do it at training. So in other words, the philosophy behind what you're doing and the methodology, how you do it, how you do the training. And again, I base everything on numbers because ultimately, if I go and do a training session on a Monday night and you do a warm-up without the ball and you do that for 5 or 10 minutes, that's 5 or 10 minutes where they're not getting any touches on the ball and they're not getting any interactions. So touches on the ball sort of reflect the technical actions, but interactions reflects the skill component. So the skill component is predominantly aimed at having context. So in other words, direction, defenders, some type of reference so that you can implement your technique into a skillful action. Okay, so again, mathematics. If you go to a training session on a Monday and your kids are only getting 500 or 600, let's just say 500 or 600 touches, but only 50 interactions, a child who's going to get 3,000 touches and 1,000 interactions every Monday, as opposed to someone on Monday who does the latter, is going to prove much, much quicker, is going to be much, much better player, is going to be more focused, sharper, more athletic, everything. Because of the fact that you have to take into account that they're learning. That they are learning to control the ball, they're learning to do a whole range of different things with their bodies, and that includes decision making. And decision making is the hardest thing to teach in football. It is the hardest by far because decision making is 100% environmental. Everything about decision making is about the environment that you're in. If you're doing a passing practice and your coach is telling you what to do, when to do it, how to do it, which direction to pass, which foot to use, which way to do this, it's driven by the coach. It's not driven by the environment. And so that's why, in an essence, everything I do is game based. It's based on a game, a competitive game. Whether it's a rondo, a 5v2, there's a game there. You go in the middle, you lose. If you come out, you win. It's as simple as that. So it builds those competitive juices in the kids, because kids are always competitive, regardless of whether it's the friendly or there's points. They don't care. They just want to compete, because it's human nature to want to compete. It's just the way we are as humans. We are always competitive. Everybody wants to win, and I'm no different. I like winning. So when you do that at training and you put it in a game, training becomes more interesting and more exciting, because there's always that element of competitiveness. Plus, because you're doing it in a game, there's always somebody trying to take the ball off you, which means your interactions are higher, and your decision-making processes improve overall over a shorter period of time because of the frequency that you have. So if you do that 3 times a week and you conduct your training sessions in a way where everything's in reduced spaces, the majority of the things, I'm not saying everything, but the majority of all of your training sessions are in reduced spaces, so that the focus isn't on physicality, the focus is on how good you are technically, positionally, how well you open up your body, how well you receive the ball, how well you do all those things, then you're in a very, very good environment to develop, regardless of how you play on the weekend, because you're improving as a footballer, because you are in the right environment. So I want parents to understand it's these weekend games that we're all obsessed about are a novelty. Your children don't learn as much on the weekend as they do during the week. So what you should be looking out for is what's happening at training during the week, because that's where your children are going to learn. It's not the weekend games. Yes, they get the the entertainment value of the weekend playing against other opposition, suiting up, representing your club, having people watching. All those things are important. I'm not discrediting that. It is important to have weekend games. It is important, but you shouldn't obsess over your child's performance on the weekend, because in most cases when I get parents come up to me, they're asking me about their weekend games. They never ask me about what they're doing at training, how they behave at training, what they're doing. No one ever asked me about training, but training is actually the place where I've got the most control. The weekend I don't. All I can do it in the weekend, to be honest with you, if you ask any coach that's like me, that is focused on giving everybody equal game time, you spend half the time stressing about who to put on, who to put off, so that you can keep the consistency of the team going, and also ensuring that everybody gets an equal go, an equal opportunity. Because no matter how you want to sell it to me, at the end of the day, Australia is a user pay system. Everybody pays to play. Therefore, if I'm going to pay $2,800, $2,500, whatever the amount is these days in NPL1, for my child to participate, and my child goes to a trial and he gets picked by that club, then I expect that club to treat my child the same way they treat their superstar players. Because that's the same thing I would expect my teachers of my children at school to do with my children. I mean, you send your kids to school, I'm pretty sure they don't just teach the bright ones or the better ones and then leave the other ones on the bench for the majority of the game. It just doesn't happen. You need to teach all of them. That's because we as adults are in a child-related industry and we have a duty of care. The competitive juices tend to take over on the weekends. It happens to me. But at the end of the day, you've got to keep reminding yourself, you have duty of care over the children that you're coaching. That is the bottom line. You have duty of care of the coaching. Now, I'm not saying we should cotton wool our kids. I think it's important that the kids understand that they need to perform. They need to play well on the weekend. If they want to start the games or if they want more game time, it comes back down to performance. There is an element of performance, and I remind my kids that all the time, that your amount of time on the pitch is proportionate to the value you bring to the team. And for that to happen, you've got to come to every training session, and you've got to apply yourself 100% at every training session like it's a game on the weekend. Because ultimately the decisions that we make on the weekend are based on who comes to training, who doesn't come to training, and how hard these players train and their level of value. So, if the kids don't show up to training for whatever reason, and it goes on, then obviously they're not going to get equal game time. They don't deserve it, because to play on the weekend, you need to attend. You need to come to training. So those are the things that you need to be more concerned about. Not so much games on the weekend, but you need to be more concerned about what happens at training. Is the coach that is looking after your child, is he a teacher? Is he a mentor? Is he a good role model? Does he speak to them the right way? These are the things that you've got to ask yourself. And unfortunately, in this country, it's not very well. I guess the word is regulated in terms of how well coaches understand their roles. Like we have TDs in clubs, and most of the TDs are nothing more than just babysitters. They're not really TDs, because the role of the TD should be to oversee all of the sporting programs at every age group in the club. So in other words, the TD sets the direction of how they're going to be coached, in what manner, what methodology, and what philosophy, and everything should be replicated through, so that there's a continuous line that connects, in NPL, for example, the SAP right through to the senior team. There should be a continuous line that everybody gets trained in a similar way. It doesn't have to be identical, but it has to be the same philosophy behind the training principles that you need in order to have success long-term as a club. Because right now, as it stands, it's just a merry-go-round. Players go from club to club, coaches go from club to club. It's hard to find good coaches, it's hard to keep good coaches. And unless clubs start doing something about that, it's just going to continue on being the same mediocre, substandard competitions that I see every week at the moment, right? And it's not fair on the kids. It's not fair on the ones who work harder sometimes, because we end up just signing players sometimes just because we need to make up numbers, and I just don't think that's right either, because it comes back down to money. right? Because it's a user pay system. The clubs can't generate income because we basically have what's happening in Europe right now, which is the Super League that everybody's arguing about, saying no, it's for the rich only and blah blah blah. Well, that's what we have here. That's what the A League is. It's exactly the same. It's not a pyramid system. Nobody can play in the A League except for the rich and the millionaires who own the licenses. It's a rich man's club. That's basically what it is. It's a closed system that is only open to a certain number of people. So because of that, there is absolutely zero investment below the A League. There never will be. I mean, if I was rich, I wouldn't invest in a club below the A League, knowing that I can't get into the A League. All right. So that's and it's not a matter of saying if you're rich or if you're not rich. It's a matter of saying that there may be some people who want to invest at a lower level club to build up the club, to find sponsors, to find people, but there's just no incentive to do so because there's no ladder to climb. Bottom line is there's no ladder to climb. You can't get a good corporate level of sponsorship at MPL level. It's really the clubs that do the best are community clubs like Rockdale, for example, that has a large immigrant community backing it, with a lot of people who own businesses who sponsor the club with money, and for that reason they're able to run their club in a way a little bit better than someone else, because it's just financed a little bit better through the community. But ultimately, what's happened is A-League started, and since the A-League started, the fees have just gone through the roof. And the reason why the fees have gone through the roof is because there's an exaggerated wage demand in MPL 1, and they need to get the money from somewhere. So it's just so much easier to slog the parents than it is to go and find sponsors, because to find sponsors you need somebody working full time, and that means you need to pay that person, and there's no guarantees they're going to find the sponsors to even cover their own wages. So it's just a basket case. So when it comes to your children, you've got to focus on what the reality is of their participation, and what you should be focused on is character building, performance building, so that regardless of whether they make it to a high level in football or not, that they're going to be able to use those skills in everyday life, in their work life, in their jobs, and whatever it is they decide to study, or whatever trade they take up, that they follow the principles of football, which is it's always about raising your standards and being a better person and being disciplined, and having structure and knowing how to plan and prepare and look after yourself, look after your health, look after your mental health. That's what football is, and that's what it should be for children, because the odds of getting to the top are very, very slim. So when your child is not getting the game time on the weekend, it's just silly to go and ask the coach why. We live in a dysfunctional system. It's just as simple as it is. It's a system based on ideas and personal opinions. So personal opinions, in my opinion, shouldn't exist in football. It should be based on scientific facts and knowledge and preparation and education. But it's not, because everybody is an expert when it comes to football. All right, everybody thinks they're an expert when it comes to football, but you've got to understand that depending on who you are and what your background is and what you do, everyone has a different perspective on what the game is, or how it should be played, or where their children should play, whether the children should play at the back or the front, or whatever it is. Ultimately, the coach is the one who decides. And, if you find a good coach, good luck. If not, then become your children's coach and try to guide them through the process. But you need to understand what the process is first before you can guide your children through the process. So I've vlogged about this many times before, that as a parent, if you want your children to succeed, you need to know a little bit about the industry that your child is interested in being successful in. So anyway, I hope that helps. Focus on training, focus on the methodology, focus on a good environment for your kids, a good coach that's going to treat your kids with respect, it's going to push your kids to be better people. That's the main thing. So I hope that's something that, reiterates with many of you. I think some of you, people that know me and know what I'm about, have stuck with me for a long time, understand what the principles are that I'm talking about here. So good luck with your children. I really wish everybody's child the best of intentions, and hope that you find the right environment, because that's, to me, is the key. Finding the right environment for your kid, the right club that creates the right environment for your child.